Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Giant's Healthy Innovators TV. My name is Barry Shrier, I'm your host. I'd like to invite everybody who are our viewers from around the world to come to the Giant Health event this year. The website is www.giant.health, where you'll meet hundreds and hundreds of leaders in the worlds of healthcare, technology, and innovation. Giant is the premier healthcare innovation event in the UK, and we invite everybody to follow us on YouTube, to follow us on social media, and if you can, to come to our event. We hope to meet you. So this episode of Healthy Innovators TV brings to you some leaders in the worlds of healthcare, innovation, and communication. We have the leading team from Medico Digital, and I'm really pleased to have them with us today. And I'd like to ask them to introduce themselves. And we're going to talk about some of the important themes in healthcare and communication and what can be done to improve the work that healthcare companies and innovators are doing and the communication issues relating to that. So to begin with, first of all, Oliver and Louis and Liz, it's great to see you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Really looking forward to this conversation. So let's begin with you, Oliver, please, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Thank you very much, Barry, and hello, everyone. My name's Ollie, or Oliver Capel, if you want to be formal about it. I am the founder and managing director of Medico Digital. For those of you who don't know, Medico Digital is a specialist digital agency for the healthcare sector. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what we do, who we work with, because I think we're going to come on to a little bit more about that as we get into the conversation. But a little bit about myself. I used to work within the healthcare sector. So I've kind of hopefully seen a little bit of both sides, both from kind of the consumer patient facing side, but also working within the space. I have my whole family is very much kind of grounded in healthcare within their professions. And me, myself, I am obsessed with health. I speak to you now with an Apple Watch on. I have a new Zoe gut health tracking that I've just started today.
Excellent.
And I'm very obsessed with my fitness and just healthcare in general. And I'm sure we'll
Excellent. Oh, good stuff. Oliver, thank you very much. Or Ollie, thank you for the introduction. And with regard to that Zoe app and the hardware, keen to learn more about that later in this conversation. And also want to make sure that you're eating properly. So that's good stuff. And likewise, Louis, hello. Nice to meet you. Please, if you can introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, Barry. Thanks. I will be brief. I'm the marketing director at Medico, so I look after our digital marketing teams, helping to make sure we're using the newest digital technologies in a compliant way to help organizations more effectively communicate with patients and HCPs. My background is more in the traditional marketing sense, working for large advertising groups, and I think the reason I joined Medico at the beginning and became one of the partners was out of a bit of a frustration with how healthcare communication was lagging behind other industries and seeing an opportunity to really make a difference there.
Excellent. No, nice to meet you, and thank you very much. And the compliance theme that you mentioned, of course, is extremely important. Let's hold on to that and make sure we touch on that further in the conversation. Super important. And Liz, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. If you can introduce yourself as well, please.
Sure, thanks, Barry. So my name's Liz Summers. I'm the head of brand and marketing at Medico Digital. So I essentially just help Medico connect with more healthcare and pharma brands so that we can add more value to how they are interacting with and connecting with either their healthcare professionals or their patients, whether that's in the UK or further afield. My background is in healthcare through and through. I've been working in healthcare for nearly 20 years. First as a healthcare professional, I worked in hospitals for a long time before moving over to a medical devices company and then over to the agency side. So what I don't know about how the NHS works probably isn't worth knowing. I've seen the good, the bad and the ugly.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's such an unbelievably complicated ecosystem. And so I think, people with your type of background, direct experience in healthcare, as well as from the provider side, as well as from the agency side, incredibly important. Not a day goes by without businesses approaching us here at Giant Health saying things like, well, we would like to sell to the NHS. And I should direct them to you so you can explain to them that there is no such thing as the NHS, but really interesting and glad to hear about your valuable background. I'm sure that can inform our conversation really positively. So to begin with, Oliver, we'll start with you, but absolutely keen to have Louis and Liz, contributing as well. So what are like new trends emerging in digital marketing? Does that make a difference? If we take a step back, let's talk about digital marketing for health and pharma broadly, and then specifically, are there new trends emerging, and what are those, and why do they matter?
Great question, and we could talk all day about the latest trends, and I would probably direct you first and foremost to our very insightful blog on our website where we write lots of articles on this. I mean, it would be remiss of me not to talk about AI if we're going to be talking about latest trends. There is a lot of hype about that, and we could talk a lot in detail about AI and that application of that to healthcare marketing specifically. Again, I've just written an article on this. I think that is a big area that healthcare organizations will be looking to leverage as much as possible over the next coming years. But I think the big one in the pharma space, to be honest, and has been more kind of emerging over the last sort of couple of years, is omni-channel experiences. So how do you utilize multiple channels of communication to ensure that you are delivering a relevant and timely message to specific target audiences? And it's been something that's been much more successful within the direct consumer space historically, particularly with things like e-commerce and outside of healthcare. Right. But now, how do pharmaceutical organizations, life sciences, medical device, how do they create a really effective and impactful omni-channel experience for a very diverse set of a niche set of target audiences with the healthcare professionals and payers that they target, but also how do you do that at scale within a heavily regulated and compliant environment with different markets and geographies and regulations that apply to them? So yeah, it's a very big question, I guess, but I could talk about either of those things, but open that up to Barry and Liz.
So thank you, Oliver. I mean, so AI is one thing. We can dig down into that. And by the way, just as a reminder, a lot of our viewers might be clinicians that are launching businesses or clinicians who are medical advisors to businesses. A lot of our listeners and viewers might be on the engineering and product development side. And a lot of them might be on the business development side, but not necessarily experts in marketing. So if you don't mind, I'll also ask you guys just to take a step back. So for example, Oliver, you mentioned omni-channel and multi-channel and the word channel itself. So Louis, maybe if you could add, so when one talks about channel, what does that mean? And what does omni-channel mean?
Yeah, it's a good question, and thank you for bringing it back to that, because I think we have a tendency to get hung up on our own jargon and expecting everybody to understand exactly what we're saying.
No worries.
So it's important to remember that's not the case. When we talk about channels, we just talk about a specific stream of marketing. So from a digital perspective, if you think about search and the way people interact with search to find information, you could use that as a form of marketing, and that would be one of your channels. You could use a social media platform to be getting in front of a member of your audience. That would be another channel. I think what Ollie was alluding to is this golden idea of omni-channel, which is, as the name suggests, is being across all channels. And what people really want to do when they talk about omni-channel is provide an incredibly personalized experience to an individual from your target audience. So making sure that no matter which touch point they're experiencing your brand from, be it a social media, through their email, through in-person kind of rep visits, for example, that the messaging is joined up. The message that you're getting to that member of the audience is right for them, and it's right for the time that they're viewing that message. And I think this is something that has been talked about a lot, but actually done well very rarely. And I think back from the 90s when Amazon was starting, and I think there's a quote from Jeff Bezos somewhere saying if they want 20 million customers, they're going to need 20 million stores. And I think he saw that quite a long time ago. So it's slightly frustrating that 25 years on, or whatever it is now, that we're still not quite there. I think there's a real misunderstanding of that word, omnichannel.
Okay.
And again, if you look at it, if you Google it, if you look at what agencies are talking about these days, everybody is using that word. So it will be familiar to some of your listeners, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But I think there's maybe a tendency for people to be utilizing one or two of those channels. So putting out some content that's accessible via search, and maybe running some ads on LinkedIn or Twitter, and ticking a box to say omnichannel is done. We've kind of we've been there and done it. But I think where it can go and where it will be going is, like I said, a much more personalized approach. So being able to join up if you're looking to engage with healthcare professionals, for example, trying to understand where they're at in terms of their engagement cycle with your brand. Have they read a particular white paper that you've published? What are their thoughts on that? Have they then signed up to a particular event that you have going? Is the rep that's assigned to that HCP, are they aware of where they're at in their online journey and how they've been understanding your marketing collateral, and making sure that the marketing that they are interacting with is being adjusted as they go through that journey, to make sure it's just simply as valuable as possible to them, and they have a better brand experience.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for both of you guys for the helpful introductory comments and explanations. So Liz, for example, are you guys, I mean, I'm not asking you to name a client or anything, but in terms of this omni-channel marketing or multi-channel, is there an example maybe that you could talk to us about where, a client maybe had a requirement and you guys were saying, okay, well, how do we serve that requirement? What channels should we be using? And then how do you identify that? And then how do you roll that out with the client?
Sure. So I think if the easiest example to give you, and a good way to illustrate what Louis mentioned, is that quite often we get pharma brands and medical devices brands who traditionally have used very in-person channels. So they've relied really heavily on sales rep visits and congress attendance to try and build those reputations with their healthcare professional audience. And obviously that still has a place, but I think we can all agree that post-COVID, the world isn't quite back to normal. And although, in-person congresses are back up and running, things like hospitals really haven't reopened their doors to healthcare to sales reps in the way that people maybe thought they would. And that's still very much restricted. So what we see is that a brand, let's say, hypothetical example, of course, a diabetes brand who makes medical devices for people with diabetes, and they want to get in front of healthcare professionals who can recommend and set up patients on these products. What they might have is in the calendar of the year, a couple of key points where they go, okay, we know there's a big congress here and there's World Diabetes Day here. What we then typically do is build out a strategy which looks at those highlight points and actually says, okay, well, you're paying X amount of money to go and exhibit at this congress, but what can you do through digital channels either side of that congress activity to really maximize the engagement? And that's when we get into this really valuable omnichannel piece. That there's a lot that you can do in this example to help sort of prime your audience for attending that congress and engage with what we might call top of the funnel things beforehand. And I'll explain what that means, and then take them through a very personalized journey. And the congress maybe forms part of that journey, but actually their experience with your brand and the experience with connecting to this diabetes brand and understanding the value that the devices bring to patients is part of a much bigger system.
Okay.
So when we're talking about funnel, what I mean there is in marketing, you think about the sort of buyer journey, if you like, and you can visualize it like a funnel, where the top of the funnel is when people are sort of starting to become aware of your brand or your products, and they're starting to gain a bit of information.
Yes.
And then they move into a kind of awareness stage. And then they move into kind of maybe intent. So they're thinking about, okay, this might be something I could use with my patients, for example, or this might be something I'm interested in. And then you kind of get to the moment of action, whether that's prescribing a device for a patient, prescribing a medication, setting somebody up for Ollie clicking buy on his whizzing new sensor.
Yes.
And ultimately with marketing, you're just trying to move people along the funnel. And the way that you build out the journey for them and use these different channels and different touch points to deliver a sequence set of sophisticated messaging is part of how you move them along that funnel journey.
Brilliant. No, that's super, super clear. Thank you for the good explanation on that.
Could I add something to that, Barry?
Absolutely. Yes, please.
I think what Liz says is absolutely right. And I think a really important part of developing that strategy is it's all underpinned by a really, really thorough and comprehensive understanding and research phase to know who the audience is that you're targeting specifically. So building those audience insights, understanding what are their key challenges, motivations, where do they exist online and offline?
Yes.
What are the messages that you're going to put in front of them and where that are going to really resonate? So we do a lot of work in terms of trying to build those different buying personas, whether that be a patient or a healthcare professional, and really understanding what that journey looks like going through the funnel in order to be able to target the right message.
Brilliant. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I can imagine how important research is. What's that famous 1960s ad comment? The consumer doesn't want choice, they want what they want. And so I suppose, with digital marketing, there's the possibility of customizing and communicating to people what they want rather than saying, here's a gigantic menu. But going back to AI, Ali, could you elaborate on that? I mean, it's a big buzzword, and I think everybody is reading about AI, and it's going to take over the world and enslave humanity, according to my understanding. But putting that aside, how does AI on a direct, practical, right now today with you guys and your clients, what is AI? How does it help? What's the implication?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to get carried away with it. There's so many possibilities of what it can do potentially.
Okay. Yeah.
For us, I think just being pragmatic about it, it's people being able to use AI within agencies to be able to do things at a larger scale or quicker and more efficiently than they used to be able to.
Okay.
So that will be analyzing large data sets. It will be creating content at scale. But if you want to look at some of the more advanced possibilities, for example, and linking it back into that omni-channel strategy that we were discussing earlier, some things that you might be able to leverage in future are understanding market conditions. So, for example, if there is a rising prevalence of a new condition within specific areas, so understanding that patient demand and then being able to deliver very personalized communications at the point of care to a healthcare professional based on an understanding or predictive analytics of what's actually happening with patients and conditions and symptoms that they're seeing.
Excellent.
I think just to add to that as well, I think at the moment people are overestimating the value of what's available right now from an AI perspective, especially when it comes to marketing. Like Ollie mentioned there, it makes a lot of the maybe lower value work faster. It helps to reduce admin time. And for our part, we're looking at ways that we can make our workflows more efficient so that we can pass those cost savings back to our clients, which I think is important during times of economic uncertainty.
Sure.
But as much as that's happening, I think people are underestimating the value of where it's going to be in 6, 12, 18 months, because while at the moment it can be a kind of a fancy parlor trick to generate some images from one of the current kind of pieces of software that are out there, I don't think it's going to be that long until it can go toe to toe with some of the best graphic designers in the world in terms of what can be produced. And when you look at content production or design and development, I think that's going to be much more heavily augmented by AI, and the role of the agency itself is going to become much more consultative in terms of how you make sure that you're aware of how to use those tools, how to use them to their best ability, how to use them in a compliant way, like we mentioned earlier, and navigating that. Because I think if you're not at the forefront of what's coming, you're going to get left behind at a lot faster pace than would have been the case 5 years ago.
That's very interesting. Yeah, love to hear more about that, and also about compliance. So I don't know, Liz, if you want to comment on this, or any of you guys, what's the relationship between the world of compliance and your clients and the services that you guys are providing, and why does that matter as well? I mean, isn't it just kind of obvious in terms of compliance, or is there a lot of detail there?
So you might think it would be obvious in terms of compliance, but you'd be surprised at how many people who've never worked in the healthcare industry who are really surprised by the compliance restrictions and governance that there is.
Yeah.
So obviously people who work in the space will be familiar with the MHRA and ABPI and all those other acronyms that govern what we're allowed to say and what we're allowed to do and who we're allowed to market what to. But it's relevant to know that people who haven't worked in the healthcare field really don't have that level of baseline understanding. And that's
Sure.
where we really see the value that we bring as an agency in being a specific healthcare agency, is that all of our team are incredibly well versed in on all of that legislation and all of the regulations. And we have regular updates to make sure that we're really au fait with what's happening in the space. So what that means is that when we work with a healthcare client and we make recommendations to them about what they might consider doing in terms of messaging, in terms
Right.
of strategy, in terms of targeting, all of those things are done with compliance in mind. There's nothing more frustrating than somebody coming to you with a very sparkly plan and you having to go, yeah, no, that won't work because we're not
Oh,
allowed
no.
to do that and we're not allowed to do that. And we can't say that. That can't be backed up by a validated claim on our core claims document, blah, blah. And that's an incredibly frustrating place for health and pharma brands to be in.
I can imagine.
So really where we can add value is to be able to build things with compliance baked in from the start, to be able to create content which has already gone through a very rigorous compliance process in-house before it's sent back to the client for checking. And of course, that means that their MLR process, their MLR team are very happy usually when they get our content, because it really limits the amount of changes that they need to make and the amount of revisions and the amount of rounds of revisions that are required, which are obviously costly. They add additional time. It means
Yes.
that basically when a draft lands on the client's laptop, it's usually pretty much ready to go rather than something they have to really do a lot of work on. And
Excellent.
clients come to agencies because they want to be able to achieve their objectives and they want their lives to be fundamentally easier, right? Nobody wants to work with an agency to increase their workload. So having an agency that understands the ins and outs of the health industry and can just pick a project up and run with it without you needing to handhold them is massively valuable. And there are some complexities, particularly in the digital marketing space. So if you think about, you want to run a campaign for people with prostate cancer, as an example. One of our key clients, a fantastic client, works in the prostate cancer space. You might think logically, okay, well, we just find a way to retarget people who've searched for things around prostate cancer, right? And we then show our advert for our treatment clinic to those people. But if you can
Sure.
imagine that maybe it's not prostate cancer, maybe it's a very sensitive personal condition that you might not have discussed with, say, other people who live in your home, and then an advert pops up on your family computer to do with your erectile dysfunction, for example, that you maybe didn't want showing up for your kids. So
Sure.
there's a complex landscape in terms of what you can do and how things work in the digital space. And having a team that can navigate the intricacies of that, who can figure out a plan that is pragmatic and is compliant and will get you results, really is quite a nuanced process.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's excellent. Thank you for that. So we were talking about compliance, the complexities of it, the value there, why an agency, can make a big difference for a business. But also, let's explore that theme a little bit more broadly. This theme of, well, why can't companies do these things themselves? Why can't companies, I don't know, hire a couple of digital marketing people and say, go do your stuff. This is what you should be good at. What's the relationship? Why would a business choose an agency instead of trying to do themselves? I mean, compliance is a big thing. That makes a lot of sense. You also mentioned, of course, the kind of, make the client's life nicer and easier, reduce their workload. But what other topics are there that, if you will, clarify reasons why a client should be working with an agency instead of trying to do things in-house, for example?
Sure. Do you want me to? I can start with that one.
Sure.
I think that there's lots of reasons, and it's being able to get resource at scale that you probably wouldn't be able to in-house very easily yourself. So these digital channels, which Louis discussed earlier, they evolve rapidly, and that means that you need to have specialists within those different disciplines, ideally, to be able to know how to leverage those channels effectively and move forward with them. So you can hire an in-house marketing manager with a broad range of specialisms. Can you expect that individual to be able to manage with intricacy and detail and be on top of all of how those changing channels all the time? Then the answer is probably no. The cost of being able to hire in all of those specialists yourself is a lot. I think there's also something around just the actual partnership that you might get, the strategic value from working with an agency. So it's not just about increasing resource, it's also about tapping into that industry insight and knowledge to be able to help you to identify areas of potential growth for your sector. So you asked us about trends and things like that. And I think that's an evidence really to why an agency might be able to help you to give you navigate compliance, but also to be able to look for interesting areas of growth that you may have not thought about for your healthcare brand. Louis and Liz, I don't know if you'd add anything to that.
Oh, very good points.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think there's something in that value that agencies provide also about having a fresh set of eyes on something. I've worked before with quite a lot of companies who, because the team work in-house, are engrossed in the culture of that particular business and that particular mindset.
Yes.
They almost become sort of take things for granted. A bit like, earlier on this call, we start talking about omnichannel marketing, and you as a fresh set of eyes are like, wait, hang on, like, let's go back and explain what that means. I've seen that happen a lot, particularly when you're working on messaging and how you're going to message about your product to HCPs. There's something really helpful about having somebody with a fresh set of eyes go, I don't think people will necessarily know what that means, or we might need to explain this aspect of it, or
Yes.
yeah, people will find this claim and this element of your product interesting, but have you thought about leaning into this element of it a little bit more, because we think we'd get some traction? And you have
Yes.
that consultative expertise, and that's really where we see the agency is not just as somebody that you outsource work to. It's not just somebody who you delegate stuff to, right? It's having a strategic partner with your team to make decisions together. And we get it a lot where people come to us and go, oh, my boss keeps talking about TikTok. Should we be on TikTok? I mean, that's $1 million question, really. But that's something that we help the companies that we partner with figure out, what's a good use of your resources? What's a good use of your budget? And often we do work with their in-house team. So a lot of the companies we work with do have in-house digital marketers, but usually 2 or 3 of them. As Ollie said, they've got a broad set of skills. They're having to write email marketing. They're having to do social media posts. They're having to do blogs. They've got, multiple things. They can't be deep experts in SEO or in knowing how to get the best out of Google Ads. It's just not possible to have that level of depth, whereas they might not need to hire a full-time SEO expert. They might just need 2 hours of consultancy, which they can easily get through agency.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think all of the points that Ollie and Liz mentioned are absolutely true for why clients turn to agencies. But I think it's amplified when you're turning to an agency that specifically sits within your industry, because I think where we get a lot of or a large advantage potentially over industry agnostic agencies is just the amount of repetitions and the amount of goes we get in running campaigns across these different platforms and being able to push and innovate as much as possible within the bounds of quite strict and complicated regulations, as Liz alluded to previously. And one last, I guess, additional bonus of working with an agency like ours, which is it wouldn't be high up your initial list of why you'd want to go out to an agency, but it's probably the first question that we get asked whenever we're onboarding a client is, what does good look like? And really understanding within the industry what other people are doing, what's possible, and whether or not their previous marketing efforts are anywhere near the mark. Because I think if you're in-house at a brand, working on a brand, it can be very easy to be kind of siloed and looking at what you're doing compared to what you were doing last year and thinking that the rate of change is good and keeping pace with the industry. But it's quite difficult to know what's going on behind closed doors elsewhere. And I think that's another real benefit that our clients get from working with us.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Louis. Thank you for adding that. I mean, it seems incredibly intuitive, doesn't it? That, you guys having the absolute expertise and focus within healthcare makes a difference, because it's a tricky sector, isn't it? And It's certainly from my entire career as a tech entrepreneur, now, for the past 10 years working in healthcare, learning on an ongoing basis how incredibly complicated and, if you will, nuanced healthcare is, and different from other sectors. So that makes a lot of sense. I also certainly really appreciate what you said about, a marketing manager. What's the phrase? You kind of miss the wood from the trees. Whereas if you guys are working in the sector broadly, having sector expertise, working for different clients, but still within the healthcare sector, you'll begin to know, well, these things work, these things don't work, these things were tried last year, everyone's been talking about it, doesn't work. We have this new Chinese government spy agency, TikTok, which we should be working with, and or not working with, as the case may be. And so all that expertise, can be brought to each client, which you have been learning from everybody else, can't it? And there's
Exactly.
surely a lot of value in that.
Yeah, and I think something that's interesting is that as well as industry trends in digital marketing, so things like AI and omnichannel and so on, there's also emerging trends in the healthcare industry, right? So we
Yeah.
know that, for example, assistive technology is a huge piece right now. There's a lot going on in how AI is going to potentially transform the way that people interact with healthcare services and the treatments that are available.
Yes.
We've seen in the last couple of years a big move in how brands are conceptualizing the HCP and patient relationship, and a big move towards empowering patients with more education and information, and them as
Yes.
active participants in their own healthcare experience, and therefore people doing more direct to consumer messaging and marketing. So I think one of the benefits also of having, people who are on the forefront of digital and can bring you the latest digital options to weigh up and see if they're right for your brand, is that we also know how the healthcare landscape is mapping out,
That's a very
um,
good point. Yeah.
and
I
being
mean, we
able
know.
to see, for your brand strategically, yes, you should make a plan based on now, but also look forward to say, okay, this is where the industry is going, and this is how you can stay up to date and also ahead of your competitors, which obviously is number one priority for people.
Yeah. No, very, very good point. It reminds me of that mug that you see when you visit your GP on her desk, the coffee mug, which says, don't confuse your 5 minutes of Googling with my 20 years of medical training and expertise. But the landscape is changing, and the relationship between patients and doctors, as you have said, is changing, and the view of clinicians in society is changing, and patients do want to Google their conditions and learn a little bit, but maybe just that little 5 minutes of Googling isn't the one and only thing the patient can do to help themselves and to help their relationship with the clinician. So that's really interesting.
There's also a good opportunity, I think, for healthcare brands to help bridge the gap there. It doesn't have to be either or. The patient and the healthcare professional don't have to be adversaries. What
Exactly.
we see increasingly with some clients we work with is the options, for example, having like quite clever, intuitive digital decision makers, where the HCP can, for example, input some information about the non-specific information about the patient, and it will help them access the most up-to-date guidelines and regulations about for example, the prescribing guidelines, and kind of spit out a recommendation about possible sources of treatment for that patient. So
Nice.
that can be actually used as a collaborative tool between the patient and the healthcare professional to help their joint decision making. And we have the same
Yes.
kind of thing with like discussion tools. We worked recently with a client who found that the way that healthcare professionals were managing clients' expectations about treatment was really problematic.
Oh,
So
wow.
patients were coming back with the perception that their treatment hadn't worked, whereas actually the treatment worked in the way it was expecting to work, but wasn't a kind of magic fix. So
Okay.
what we were looking at with them is a kind of shared discussion tool and a sort of way of educating HCPs and supporting HCPs to talk to their patients about what to expect from treatment, to manage their expectations, so that then the patient comes back with a more positive perception of their treatment. They're more likely to remain adherent to the treatment.
Exactly.
The brand gets to sell more product, the patient gets better outcomes, the healthcare professional looks better, and everybody has a better experience. And
Yes.
actually that piece where you bring the patient and healthcare professional together has a lot of potential.
Brilliant.
Barry, just to add, I think there's obviously a lot of advantages to using agencies, and I think a lot of global pharmaceutical healthcare brands are no strangers to using agencies. Many of them will have rosters of them, and it can be quite a competitive space. But
Yes.
something we're seeing in terms of a bit of a changing agency landscape is a little bit more of a movement towards actually working with one true partner agency to support you on those different objectives, because dispersing that work between multiple agencies sometimes can actually end up with different areas of specialism, but not a joined up strategy, not a joined up approach, no accountability for the success of the campaign, creative, not working with media buying, all of those sorts of things. So the movement towards a single agency to support with a particular marketing objective is something that we're seeing a lot more of as well.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So not necessarily a health issue or an expertise in health issue, or not necessarily even a expertise in marketing in health issue, but an issue regarding the relationship between a supplier and the client.
Yes.
Yeah, no, very cool. Hey, well, look, we're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes. I wish we were actually in a sunny beer garden right now, and we could all have a pint and continue this extremely interesting conversation for another hour. Couple of topics. Number one, we'd love to invite you guys to come back and talk to us, maybe like, in the winter or early spring next year. So many interesting topics to cover, and we don't have time right now. And me, of course, being, of the TikTok generation, I've already lost my train of thought. And so it's time to move on. But no, pardon me for being cheeky there. Love to invite you guys to come back. Like I said, why don't we continue this conversation maybe in the winter or early spring? And I'd like to drill down a lot more with perhaps, practical case studies of things you guys are doing, examples, and looking at the omni-channel thing we touched on, looking at the AI thing, helping people understand the confusing news and information out there about all these topics. But before we wrap up today, do you guys want to comment a little bit more about where you see your relationship with clients going over the next year or two, and examples for businesses that maybe are wondering about suppliers like you guys, and types of things you'd like to consider talking to potential clients about? I think a lot of our viewers might be in that situation. Therefore, they'd love to hear, well, look, if I were to think about working with you guys at Medico Digital, well, what would I talk about? How would I identify if this is a direction I should take my business?
I think if you don't mind me starting, guys, and I'll try and be really short and succinct. I think we've kind of hopefully touched on a lot of those different areas throughout this conversation. And for me specifically, it's the impact that AI, in terms of being able to produce content at scale and helping to increase efficiencies and things like that, the very quickly, rapidly evolving digital landscape, the kind of traditional medical communications agency, which focuses heavily on kind of content creation and creative. I think there will obviously always remain to a certain extent, and there will be a need for them. But I think for us, it's being a true digital partner and supporting those healthcare organizations and brands with navigating a increasingly changing digital landscape and those complex regulations, data protection laws that go with everything around that. So I think probably more of like that consultative partner.
Yes.
The digital space is probably where we're going to see more of a direction of travel, I think, just generally, and in the services we provide.
I'd agree,
Nice.
Ollie. And I think they're different clients are at different stages. We have some clients who come to us who know exactly what they want. They know that they want a digital campaign. It looks like this, it's got this creative, and here's how we want to run it. And it's a very specific requirement. We have some clients who come to us and go, oh my God, we need some help. We're not hitting our objectives. Help us. And for those, we're happy to put together a proposal and a set of recommendations and do, if you like, a bit of an audit on what their current activity is and really see where they might get the most impact. So whether it's something that is very specific and defined, or whether it's something which right now is much more nebulous, that's something we're always happy to talk to healthcare brands about. We will be at the Giant event on the 4th of December, which we're really excited about. So we'll be hosting a panel discussion on the women's health stage, which really brings industry leaders in the women's health space around how they're helping connect with HCPs and patients who are their target audience, and also how they can use clever marketing and how they are using their marketing to help really address some of the health equity issues that we see in the space and make sure that we can kind of break some of the stigmas that we see in the women's health arena. So really excited to join you on the 4th of December.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Liz. Obviously, within the Giant Health event this year, which, like you said, is 4th and 5th of December in London, we have a lot of leaders of healthcare in the UK. We have Will Quince, British Government Cabinet Minister from the Department of Health, speaking. We have Dame Leslie Regan, Ambassador for Women's Health to the United Kingdom, speaking. Obviously, we're grateful for your sponsorship from Medico Digital and really looking forward to your panel discussion. We have people like Professor Asif Ahmed, founder of Aston Medical School, speaking at Giant and leading a panel discussion. So lots of very interesting stuff, and very keen to see you guys, of course, at the Giant event this year, and very keen to make sure that it's worthwhile for all of our visitors and all of the healthcare professionals, as well as the pharma and national and global medtech businesses coming to the event. So thanks, Liz, for reminding me about that. I have to put that event in my diary. But nice to see you guys, and thank you for your time. Honestly, I know you guys are super busy, but you're doing extremely interesting and valuable stuff. And we all share a vision, which is to improve the health and well-being of people by advancing the innovation and capabilities of healthcare to deliver better healthcare outcomes at lower cost, to improve the health and well-being of citizens. I can't think of a more noble goal. And so glad that we're sharing together on that journey. So Oliver, obviously, and Louis and Liz from Medico Digital, thank you very much for supporting Giant Health. Thank you for the show today. And again, I really hope that we can continue and do another episode maybe in the new year to talk about these important subjects further. So thanks, you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Barry. Remind us to bring the beers next time, and we can do a virtual simulation of the beer garden that you mentioned previously.
Yeah, no, that's an extremely good idea. Back to COVID days where we're all sipping beers at home, but pretending we're together.
I was going to say I'd prefer it to be in that beautiful back garden that's let
me turn the sunshine up on that one. There we go. Yeah. Hey, nice to see you guys. So
Thanks,
once again,
Barry.
this has been Oliver and Louis and Liz from Medico Digital. You can read more about them and links to their website at the bottom of our YouTube channel. We would like to thank them for their generous and important support of Giant Health. So again, as a reminder to all of our viewers and listeners from around the world, this has been this week's episode of Giant's Healthy Innovators TV. We hope if you like these episodes, you will like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. We always welcome businesses from around the world and clinicians to message us. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to connect you guys with the important work that Medico Digital is doing. And so you can learn more about that on the Giant website and at the bottom of the links in our YouTube channel here. And once again, we invite everybody to go to the Giant website, www.giant.health. We invite all of you to come to our event in London, England in December, and hope to see you there. Thank you.